What's up, everybody? This is the second episode of the Oh Yeah Ticket Podcast Show. I am your host, Jay Gregory, with my co-host, the Dude Atwell. Yeah. How we doing?
We're doing great, man. It's a Saturday morning. The sun is shining. It's freezing cold out, but that's all right.
Yeah, it's kind of disrespectful, actually. It went from like 60s to 30s, at least where I'm at, Midwest.
Well, and it was like there's like a sheen of like frost everywhere.
Oh, sure. It almost hurts your feelings. You know what I'm saying? When you have to walk out.
Like about a week of fall, and now it's winter again.
Like everybody's out here flexing. Oh, look at me! Next thing you know, the next day it's like, oh, where's my sweater? You know, it's crazy. Man.
So, how was your Halloween?
Halloween was okay. It was a little wet, a little cold. We had some snow, not a lot, really? Just a couple flurries. Still ridiculous, but the good thing is my son is old enough to kind of go on his own, so that's what he did. And my daughter is young enough to where, you know, like 1.5 streets is good for her if it's cold, you know, especially since it's cold. She was done. She was good. So I didn't have to be out there long. Yeah. And, you know, out here, it seems like there's this like theme where the women hand the candy out while the men take the kids out. But because it's one of my daughter's first Halloweens, really, you know, that she understands, my wife came with me and stuff. So it was nice.
That's cool.
Short. Yeah. It was fun. It was cool. It was like cold outside. Colder than a winter today.
Which is today. So, my Halloween was pretty eventful. It was kind of fun. And it's the fact that my sister dressed up as Slimer from the Ghostbusters. Yeah, great. And my nephew was Peter Venkman, and my sister dyed his hair. Well, not really dyed his hair, but like had the spray can stuff for his hair to get darker. And
right.
When he did that, when she did that, it reminded too much of me as a kid. It looked like me, and I was like, "Hi, Marcia." Hold on 1 second. I got a friend of mine. How are you?
How you been? Good. How are you?
Awesome. Are you going to be at Open Court tonight?
No, I'm not going to be.
Oh, how's Marty?
He's doing good.
Anything can happen, folks.
Anything can happen on the
Hi.
Yep, this is my friend Marcia.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Yep. How you doing?
That's fun. But yeah, so everything's okay. How's he reacting to the treatment?
He's doing okay. It's like it's not bringing the swelling down, so he's going to meet up with his doctor later, and like next week actually is his appointment, and they're going to see if they're going to switch to a different dose or what they're going to do from here.
Okay.
He's not having any kind of, he's still in a lot of pain. So.
Well, I hope he's feeling a little bit better, and I hope to see you again soon.
I know, miss you guys.
All right, see ya. Yeah, a friend of mine I role play with. She's pretty cool. Cool. That's what happens when you run into your local neighborhood Panera Bread.
There you go. There's the studio. Danny, there's the dude's studio for right now.
Why not, man?
Do what you gotta do.
Do what you got to do. So, like, all right, back to Halloween.
Right.
So we're walking around, and she's got this sign she made out of cardboard. And it was two tombstones. One said, "Rest in peace, Harold Ramis, aka Egon Spengler." Right. And the other one said, "Rest in peace, John Belushi." Now, no one really knows this, but if you like really get into the details of what Ghostbusters was like, Venkman, the role of Peter Venkman was originally given to John Belushi to play, but he died before they were able to start filming. So Bill Murray came in and took it over. So what they did was they created Slimer as an homage to Belushi, because literally he would just come in, people's houses when he was ever on a coke binge or something, and just eat, get it all over himself, go in and fall asleep. So
for sure.
So we're going out, all walking around. I'm with my daughter and my nephew, and halfway in, he's done with the proton pack and everything. He's done with everything, and he's 4 or 5 years old, and I'm like, why do we even bother? But my daughter's like gung ho in it, but she wore heels, and I said, you shouldn't wear heels. She goes, I'll be fine. I'm like, yeah, bring your tennis shoes just in case. Well, she did bring her tennis shoes, but she forgot to put them in her bag. So she literally, for the last trek of the night, was barefoot walking through Glen Burnie. I said, you better watch your step, girl. So, but the funny parts was, like, every time my sister would go up to trick or treat at a doorstep, Stacy would get that she was Pickle Rick, that she was a big giant blob, like she was a candy, like a molded candy corn. I was like, she's like, I'm Slimer from the Ghostbusters. But the people that did get it, they were like shocked. I was like, Stacy made their night.
I mean, I got it. I saw the picture. I didn't even have to read her description on her post. I was like, dude, she's Slimer. It's awesome.
Exactly. So it was really cool to watch that happen. And people were asking me about my costume. Honestly, I really didn't have one. I had this purple shirt with like these brownish, grayish slacks that I wear for work. So the funny part, what I kept saying to people, is I was Grimace as a job counselor. So,
Grimace people too, probably like, who's Grimace?
Yeah, like, who's Grimace? I'm like, it's before your time. Grimace graduated from the McDonald's Academy. So, But yeah, so our topic today.
Our topic is about the incomparable, legendary screenwriter, director, producer, John Hughes.
Yes, we went into a rabbit hole with this dude. I thought I knew him before we started looking at a lot of his stuff, and I was just totally blown away by all the stuff. He had like fingers in a lot of different pies. He was a producer, a writer, inspiration. It was enough so that I'm sitting there trying to type all the stuff he's done, and I realized I'm just going to get like arthritis if I keep doing this. So I just pulled up the page and was like, okay, this is it. We asked our people on a poll of what their favorite John Hughes movie was, and I didn't get very many people that came in, but the people that did, they didn't realize that half the stuff he did, aside from, like Breakfast Club and Uncle Buck, and I was like, he wrote, and then I looked at the list myself, and I was like, you know what, this has to change my my all-time favorite, because I didn't know that he had a hand in a lot of this other stuff, but he did. And you sent me,
go ahead.
You sent me that article.
Yeah.
That article from National Lampoons, and I actually read it this time finally. Yeah. It was good, but it was like,
it's hilarious.
Wow. Uh-huh.
It's hilarious. And you know what's great about it is just to kind of jump forward to present time, you can really tell the impact that John Hughes even had, because many shows, but I'm just going to talk about the Goldbergs specifically, because the Goldbergs takes place in 1980s. And we're going to say, I think they're starting to slowly kind of get into, like, obviously the early 90s here because the kids are growing up. But premise of it is 80s, the family dynamic, but a lot of their source material in about, I would say, 3 or 4 episodes now has been John Hughes. This most recent one they did, was basically National Lampoon's Vacation. Okay? Which is what even made it more hysterical to me, because when I knew he had written these stories, but I hadn't ever come across them until we were doing our research.
Yep.
And they were accessible. They were accessible because I'm currently also, I mean, I read the Christmas one as well, which is, it's funny because what you're seeing in these is, it's not just like with the vacation one, it's not just vacation, but you're almost like, well, like parts of that's like planes, trains, and automobiles. Parts of that's like, you know, Uncle Buck. Parts of that's, you know, and the Christmas one is the same. Like the very first sense I got from the Christmas was there's like Home Alone in this, you know, just the whole family getting together and all that. But more than that, it's just that impression that he still has his work, you know, his body of work has on people today. And it's important for us as a show that talks about pop culture. We would be remiss if we didn't talk about John Hughes, especially in an early episode, because he cultivated a lot of yours and mine.
I quote all the time from his movies, all the time. If I didn't quote from his movie, you know, I mean, like, there's other movies obviously that I quote from a lot, but like most of the time, like things that funny shit that happens, I end up going to a John Hughes quote all the time.
And we're at a point now where it's a beautiful thing, because with us getting into our, like, we're obviously late 30s, we're getting into our 40s. But even people we speak to that are older than us, like that was like their teenage years when it was our childhood years. Okay.
Yep.
But we have that beautiful like bridge of time where a lot of that was still relevant to us when we were growing up. I mean, funny story. I literally got Saturday school when we were in high school, and it was me and like Brandon Melvin and a couple other guys that and there were some other people, but they, you know, the funny thing was we were in there and we made that whole experience as best as we could, like the Breakfast Club. Like I literally asked the moderator or whoever was in there watching us that day, I'm like, you know, will milk be available to us? You know, like whatever. Like, and the funny thing was, I think it was at Long Reach, and I'm trying to remember who the person was, and I almost felt like it was Miss Pompey, but I don't know for sure. The point I'm making, when I started using the lines, like they got it. It was a beautiful thing because they got it. Okay. And it was just, they were like, you know, they like shut you down because they're like, no, we're not even doing that. You know, like don't go there. Because we know how the movie went, of course. But it was just, it's that like, you know, influence that he has and had, and like on me today, he still has. Like, I would love to write a screenplay, and I mean, I'm telling you, it would probably be in the vein of John Hughes, because I feel like the teen movies today and all of that stuff, like it's missing that. But let's talk about some of the work that people might not even realize he was a part of.
Exactly. Oh, but to go back to what you were saying, when I was doing all the stuff for Fun with Dirt, I had two people in mind. One, Kevin Smith. Two, John Hughes.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Because like all the stuff that happens between Harry and Jay, it's a combination of both of those type of styles. And I'm telling you, dude, you know, I didn't realize how much he meant to a lot of people until he was gone. And then
right.
So,
but yeah, like I definitely would say Kevin Smith is the John Hughes of our teenage years and early 20s and things like that. And because he has the love and the compassion for those kids, like that, he knows his audience is at. And same with John Hughes, like they knew, like this is who I'm trying to reach. This is my audience. And I read an article where they even said like John Hughes was hanging out with the actors, you know, like he became part of them. Like he loved being a kid, and it wasn't like creepy. He just was kind of like, not like Bender, because he kind of, you know, with the glasses and all that, but the attitude was kind of like he was just the cool, casual guy who was down for whatever with these kids. Because
he was down for anything.
Right.
When I got the Breakfast Club was a 30th anniversary DVD,
Right.
And they had like a whole entire like documentary about the making of it, how the actors reacted to John, how John reacted to them. If you don't, I'm tell the rest of the audience, if you haven't seen this, yeah, you go. If you haven't seen that movie, especially the for the documentary, go back and get it because it is amazing.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the edition I have, but the fact is this: I've watched the movie 10 million times, probably literally. I
Who
tell
hasn't?
everybody, it's my
Who
favorite
hasn't?
movie of all the movies in the world. That's my favorite movie, and the whole reason why is simply this:
Mm-hmm.
this was and still is for a lot of kids. This is what life is for the high school teenager.
I don't
Like
know
the
about the newer
social,
generation, but I
right?
definitely know that like for us, for even
Well, up
our
until
older cousins, it was the
yeah,
same
up
thing.
until the early 2000s, like this was the cliques, the social norms, the struggles and stuff like that was us,
Yeah.
and that was our parents before us, and that was the kids, like I said, some of the kids shortly after us, but kind of got on a tangent there. But let's like
Yeah.
going back to like his earlier work. So as we
Mhm.
said, like he got a lot of his notoriety in terms of writing because he did these stories. It's called Vacation 58, Christmas 59, and
Mhm.
these were featured in Lampoon magazine. I
Yep.
don't
National Lampoons.
National Lampoon at the time, maybe. But obviously both of those became the basis for family vacation or vacation, family vacation, and Christmas vacation.
Mhm.
So um, from that, you know, we find out in our rabbit hole because to me, yeah, like when I was like doing my research, I'm like, yeah, John Hughes, Uncle Buck, Pretty in Pink, 16 Candles, Breakfast Club, and I knew about Vacation, right, and Christmas and all that, and Home Alone, but I forgot that he was the screenplay writer for Mr. Mom with Michael
Yep.
Keaton,
Yep.
Planes,
Mr.
Trains, and
Mom.
Automobiles.
Mhm. That's one of my
You know,
favorites. Has always been Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. But like just to go down the whole entire thing, did you know that he had an uncredited role in Breakfast Club as Brian's dad, the
I
nerd's
don't.
dad?
Yeah, I don't know. Like,
He picks him up at the end of the movie.
oh man,
It's
see, it's
John
been
Hughes.
it's been a little bit since I watched it again, so I'm gonna
Uh
have to
huh.
go back to that because
Mm-hmm.
I vaguely remember it as you're saying it now, and I feel bad because I should know that like with a heartbeat, but because I'm sitting there like, well, wait a minute, it was a mom dropping him off.
Yeah, but it was his
Um,
dad that picks him up.
right, right. I
Yeah.
wonder now, looking back, if he interjected himself in any other roles in the movies, like just
I wonder
subliminally.
that myself. But from what I've got so far, I mean, there's a lot of interesting things. But remember, like we were talking about Mr. Mom and how he was just a writer in that. Did you know that he not only wrote but directed Weird Science?
Yes, that was another one. See, like I said, there was a group of like movies that it was just that he has a touch and he has a
Mm-hmm.
style. And if it dealt with and see, like this is why, like I like the movie The Pickup Artist. That's not him,
Mm-hmm.
but Molly Ringwald's in it. Robert Downey Jr. You would think it was him. And
Yep.
it's funny that movie. It seems to me, looking back, not to crap on the creative team who made that movie, but it was almost as if they were like, man, look at this magic that's happening with John Hughes. Let's
Yep.
replicate that. We got Downey Jr., we got Ringwald. We can do the same thing. And it wasn't as successful. It's up there with the cult classics, of course, now,
Mm-hmm.
but at the time. And even into the 90s and early 2000s, other movies were trying to replicate that John Hughes magic. And it's like, it's to
Tough.
me,
It's very
it's
tough.
tough, but you got to think about this. It was literally the 80s, the time. I got to take a time out.
Okay. This will
Well,
be our first time out. All right.
Hi, everybody. This is Harry Carey here. And if you've suffered from angina, you've got serious problems. You need to go to your doctor and get that checked out. You might be having a freaking heart attack. There's the #1 killer from people from Texas have eaten too much hot sauce and beef. But I'm telling you this from personal experience, angina cannot kill you directly. And just go to your doctor and see if you can't get that figured out. I'm telling you, I did. Well, actually, I didn't, because I'm dead now, but that's okay. This has been Harry Carey reporting for your angina needs. Thank you.
And we're back.
Yes, we are. And if you are just joining us, we are talking about the incomparable, the best screenwriter of the 80s.
Mr. John Hughes.
Early 90s. That's right, Mr. John Hughes. So we were talking about how some of his more his work that's not as known. It's known, but it's not as known that he was a part of it. Like Mr. Mom. You know, I just never correlated Planes, Trains, and Automobiles with him until a couple years ago, because it had his style, but it also was a departure from like the teen element.
Yeah. And I'm beginning to think that deep down, that is, even though he loved like a lot of those teen movies, but John Candy was his favorite actor to work with, because John Candy, I felt looking through all this stuff, was on a lot of his stuff.
Oh yeah, John Candy, and so like to me, like that's what I mean. Like John Candy was his like tour de force, and Molly Ringwald was his muse. You know what I mean? Like that's who he went to. And it's obviously there's probably some correlation to where, you know, she's growing up, and so she probably wasn't wanting to be attached to his work as much anymore. I think I kind of read that somewhere. Not so much in that vein, but obviously, you know, people grow up. But I could have seen her like even in like cameo roles and like every single of his movies after that. Like she could have been like the flight at the ticket agent, like in Home Alone, you know, like stuff like that. But you know, like we said, Mr. Mom, there was a couple TV shows, I think, too, in the late 70s or early 80s that he had worked on, and I, for the life of me, am drawing a blank on that.
Yeah.
But like here, another movie like Dutch with Ed O'Neill.
Yeah, Dutch.
Like that was one too that you don't. I mean,
I didn't know he did Ferris Bueller's, man.
I knew that.
Day Off. I didn't know that.
You know, and it's weird because even Ferris Bueller, like, that's kind of a departure, even though it's like the teens, the high school setting and all that, but like it's the day off kind of thing, like they're cutting school. It's still like kind of a departure from his normal style of like the teen angst and romance and all that. But then at the same time, there is a romantic quality and angst in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. You know, like him lamenting to the screen, you know, about the just the trivial things that a teenager goes through. It was kind of, and that's why it's a departure in the John Hughes style, because what he's doing now, he's like breaking that fourth wall.
Yep.
And it was that nobody was doing that really, like in those styles of movies at the time either. That who, you know, were doing teen movies, I guess, if you will. I don't really know anybody else doing them because John Hughes was that's just how prolific and, you know, inspirational his movies are, you know. And they hold up.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you this. My sister saw Breakfast Club for the first time. Not my sister, my daughter saw Breakfast Club for the first time maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. And she saw that they did a tribute episode of Victorious not very far after that. And she goes, "Daddy, that's based on the movie we saw." And I was like, "Yep, John Hughes." You know, you never know. Like this movie transcends generations. A lot of his movies transcend generations. And the funny thing is, like being kids, we see certain movies like Uncle Buck, The Great Outdoors, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, Home Alone. You see all these movies as a kid, and you're like, oh, I can relate to the kids, right? But
Right.
now, as an adult, you can start relating to these movies in an entirely different way because now you are an adult and you're going through half the shit they're going through. So
Right.
it's like you can honestly watch all these movies again as in a different setting, basically.
Oh yeah. I mean, we watch the stuff now, and we're of course we get nostalgic. We're like, I remember time and place. I remember this, or I remember so and so. There's just things about his movies that that conjure up our memories. And for me, in a sense, where like I go back in that time, in that moment.
You there? Hello? Did you disappear on me?
Yeah, hold on. I got a call coming in. I'm sorry.
All right. I'll stop recording.
One day later.
The OE Podcast Show with your boy and his co-host Danny the Dude Atwell. And this is funny because this is day 2 of episode 102. John Hughes is the top. Why is it funny? Because it just took us almost 15 minutes to figure out that my little button on my phone here wasn't turned on for the Wi-Fi, and we were lagging like a
Oh my God, it was horrible. Absolutely horrible.
We're on. We're good.
We're great.
I love technology.
When it's working right.
But like I said, we're talking about the incomparable John Weldon Hughes Jr.
Yep.
If you were born mid-70s to mid-80s, you surely grew up with his work. You grew up probably being a fan of his work. He capitalized and perfected the art of telling a story through the teenager's eyes. And if you don't know who he is, just to give a little background, he's a screenwriter, director, producer. He was born on February 18th, 1950. And unfortunately, he is no longer with us. He had passed away August 6th of 2009 in Manhattan, New York City, New York. But he left behind a canon of work that is, again, if you're looking to be nostalgic for people like Danny and myself who are almost in our 40s, and funny enough, our kids who are just hitting their teens are starting to get into this genre, this era of films that John Hughes just perfected. And the reason why, as we explained on day 1, because he told it from their point of view, and you felt like you could relate to that character. It was actually attainable, not just relatable, attainable, because he hit all the stereotypes, the idioms, whatever that the teenagers were going through. And funny enough, for people like Danny and I, when we were in high school 10 years later, from where the height of these movies, if you will, because they were in the 80s, it was the same thing for us. The bullies, the jocks, the nerds, the princesses,
the basket cases,
the weirdos, just any walk of life, we either were around it or we engrossed ourselves in it to the point where we were trying to find ourselves by being a little bit of all those ourselves.
And a lot of the actors that I'd grown to like really love, especially later on in life, I was first introduced to by John Hughes's films, like Molly Ringwald, John Cryer. John Cryer, if you don't remember, he was Lenny Luthor in Superman 4. But I remember him from Pretty in Pink, or is it 16 Candles? I think it was Pretty in Pink. But because I get those movies mixed all the time. Yeah. But that's because yeah. So but yeah, John Cryer, Judd Nelson, especially as Bender in Breakfast Club, I absolutely loved the contrast between that character and then the character he played in St. Elmo's Fire, which was not a John Hughes movie, but they they still sort of showcased the Brat Pack, as they were called.
Exactly.
Emilio Estevez. I really loved a lot of his casting. But I think wholeheartedly, after like looking at a lot of his different work, John Candy had to have been his favorite actor to work with, besides Molly Ringwald. So.
For sure. I think what it was he kind of had his muse in Molly Ringwald. He had his funny man in John Candy, but he also kind of had his not protege, I should say. He had in Anthony Michael Hall, and he said it in some of his writing, like Anthony Michael Hall was who he was.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was pretty much, his characters in his movies were the epitome of who John Hughes was growing up.
So in essence, what you're trying to say is he was Rusty Griswold. He was Brian from Breakfast Club, and he was also, is it Wyatt in Weird Science? He was all
in 16 Candles.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was. No, he was Gary in Weird Science.
Yeah, Gary.
Wyatt,
I'm sorry, I got the names confused again.
But again, like, dude, they said. I mean, I was doing my research, my due diligence, and it's true. Like, they were like talking about Weird Science and how, at the time, it was. I mean, it wasn't a bad movie, okay? And people went and saw. Obviously, kids went and saw it. The teens went and seen it. But in terms of reviews and stuff, I don't think it was like considered to be one of the best. Yeah. But in retrospect, they were talking about how nobody casted the evil brother better than John Hughes did with Bill Paxton as Chad.
Oh my God!
In Science, like the military barbaric brother coming back from leave and just being a total dick, and a lot of guys related to that person being the younger brother, at least in the 80s, I would say.
Yeah.
If they even, if you had a sibling like that. And I just found that to be kind of a neat thing because you don't hear about the supporting actors in that kind of light when people are talking about a movie.
But a lot of his supporting actors seem to help make the movie. That's the best part.
I mean, Weird Science again.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when they freeze when Lisa like freezes the grandparents in the closet, that facial expression alone, it takes up 0.3 seconds of the movie, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, I remember it today because the look was so impactful, and it kind of exemplified the ridiculousness of the movie,
Mm-hmm.
where there were so many instances in that movie. And what I loved about it too, though, was it was kind of like, I remember the scene in Breakfast Club where they're smoking. They're up in the loft smoking the weed.
Yep.
Brian's letting loose, and he's like, what it is if two can't hold they smoke, But then when Lisa takes him out to the club in Weird Science, I saw the evolution of a character, but it was at the same time as Gary. It was like a more confident Brian. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because he's like, I don't care. I don't care. Like it was just, I like that about John Hughes' casting. He didn't have to go far to find the right person for his characters.
Yeah.
Because I think the magic of it too was I think he began writing these screenplays around, he already knew who was going to play these people.
Yeah. That's an advantage. Especially if it's because sort of I'm in the same situation right now with casting for voice actors. I sort of have an idea of what type of voice I want for a character, and now it's awesome to have like this list of people that I can go to that have already said that they were interested in doing something like this, and it gives you a little bit more freedom to work with a script, knowing that you have a certain style of voice or a different type of actor that can do all that stuff. So and in a way, that made John Hughes' work even easier.
Right. That's definitely true. I think also too, though, was like he, you know, even in his like work that wasn't that great, he was still at least like, and he got criticized for his later work, like stuff after Home Alone 2 was kind of like, but I think it still had like a John Hughes magic to it, but it wasn't. I mean, look, like we've been saying, he capitalized on the teen spirit, and even like the younger kids in the other movies, like Uncle Buck and Home Alone. But again, he used Macaulay Culkin.
Yep.
For those movies, and the thing about it is, when you have an actor in mind, it's easy to write around them. But the thing is, you're creating a magic with that actor as well. And when these people started getting older and moving towards other projects or whatever, like he didn't have that anymore. So he was kind of like reinventing the wheel, so to speak, with his own writing. And I just don't think it ever hit again, like, it did in the 80s and early 90s.
But then again, maybe it could have been a case maybe of oversaturation of material, because sometimes that happens too. When you're given so much of a good thing for so long, the people kind of need a break from it. I don't know. Sure. I mean, but it's
his target audience. Okay, so you figure this. The kids who were teens watching in the 80s, watching The Breakfast Club, 16 Candles, Pretty in Pink, those kinds of people were growing up in the early 90s. And so now they were maybe old enough to say, oh man, Home Alone 2, let me go see it because it looks funny. Because they're still like with Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern, they were still the era of like there's a thematic presence there of like child to adult. So there's going to be some over the head humor for children. So I'm going to go check it out.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you start getting into the 90s. Now these people are having kids, and maybe what he's doing isn't pertaining to them anymore. Their styles or their likes, because they're not those people anymore. I think it's funny how. Yeah, you change your writing style or you change your directorial style to probably in his mind, he was doing things at that time that he just wanted to do because he could. Not really needing or caring if it was a big hit, but maybe he, for him, he found some kind of resonance in it. So that's why he attached himself to projects that were kind of like, I mean, like the whole Beethoven series. I've never seen the first one, and there's like 5 of them. Nah, like I don't see how anybody except little kids who watched it probably identify with the dog.
Yeah, especially especially the first one. I did find myself at some point identifying with Charles Grodin's character, having to deal with the said dog, because I was starting to get it as an adult now. And it's a lot different. Like I said, we were originally talking about the other day that you start to look a lot of his different movies in a different light because of you changing over time. So it's really interesting. So let's go down to his filmography from the beginning. And I guess we can talk about each one, especially in what it relates to me or in you. The first one he did was in 1982. It was called National Lampoon's Class Reunion, and he served as a writer and a uncredited actor. I've never seen this one. Did you see it?
National Lampoon's, what was it?
Class Reunion. And I don't think it had anything to do with Clark Griswold.
Right. I see it's written by him. I'm trying to...
I think at one point I'm going to have to try and see if it's available, like on Amazon Prime or something, just to at least get an idea of what it's like.
Yeah, it says it's available on Amazon. Cool. I'll have to check myself as well. I didn't know that. There's one that I didn't know. It doesn't look like, I'm saying this because this is obviously an older movie, 82. I only recognize one name, and that's Michael Lerner, who I believe actually is a woman.
Yeah, I was only 2 years old when it came out, but
right. Me too.
If
So
that.
It says it's a horror comedy.
Oh, that might be interesting.
Yeah.
Right. So the next one was Mr. Mom. Both of us have probably seen that probably at least 4 or 5 times over our lives because Michael Keaton was just that much of an awesome guy.
Right.
And I love the lighter humor of finally showing, I guess, a light in the fact that men can be caretakers too, for children, especially in a funny way of the mentality that a guy will get something done just to get it done, and he will use anything at his disposal to do it. Of course, like not always.
It flipped the script of the whole, like, the guy has to work. If it wasn't beyond the social norm for women to be working at the time, but it was still also pretty common that there were a lot of stay-at-home moms and housewives.
Mm-hmm.
So there was some irony in his situations and experiences that, as we know from watching, seemed like put him in dire straits and reckless abandonment and like, what do I do? Where we know the woman would have like been handling it with like,
bless you.
Excuse me. Thank you. Sorry. Would have been handling it with ease. You know what I mean? Because it's a woman's work. She knows what she's doing. This is
Mm-hmm.
And in retrospect, it's now, again, we're more further into a society where there's a lot of stay-at-home dads, now, and there's a lot of women who are proud and happy to be the money maker, the bread maker, whatever, going out there doing the work.
Bringing home the bacon.
Bringing home the bacon. So there is definitely quality to that, Mr. Mom.
Yeah. So this brings us to National Lampoon's Vacation, the first of the Clark Griswold saga and his family.
Right.
I probably quote from this movie more often than a lot of other movies, especially because this first movie was amazing. A lot of people kind of have a thing about Chevy Chase. Either you really like him or you think he's the most horrible person on the face of this planet. But for this movie, he was perfect for Clark Griswold. And then the family. And especially from the writing you gave me the other day to read over, there's a lot of stuff that they taken from that. They've obviously had to work and tweak certain things, but it was funny to see how John Hughes was able to use what he had written and make this masterpiece. But he served.
He goes over the embankment and like they get like air in the car.
Yeah,
I'm like, remember that in the movie happening.
I mean, there's like instances where my wife or somebody else would say something, and I just respond with real tomato ketchup, Eddie? Nothing but the best. I'm like something like absolutely stupid, and I'll just respond with that. And then like in contrast, also like a really redundant gift. And I'd quote from the Christmas one, "It's the gift that keeps on giving the whole year round, Clark."
Right.
I mean, mostly from coming from Cousin Eddie, but still,
right.
It's
all part of it.
It's all part of it. But yeah, he actually wrote the national anthem for Wally World. That's what they're saying on here. That he wrote. Who's the moosiest moose we know? Marty Moose. It's the star of our favorite show. But he was basically, obviously, taking a tribute, an homage from Mickey Mouse, because obviously it was originally set in Walt Disney World, like the stuff that they were going to do. But you obviously couldn't, without Disney's permission, do something like that. So they created Wally World, and it was pretty freaking cool, to say the least. There was another movie on here called Nate and Hayes. I don't think he wrote this one, but I never seen it. But that was also in 1983.
Right. Well, that's the original title. I think what happened is they changed it to Savage Islands.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, which I'm seeing on IMDb. But I'm not even familiar with this movie. Like, for all the years of 80s movies, I've never heard of this movie, ever. And it has Tommy Lee Jones in it.
Yeah. I mean, and the weird thing is, like, some of these, it would be fairly interesting to go back now and see some of these ones we've missed along the line and see what we get from them. But, yeah. 1984 rolls around, and we get 16 Candles. This is the one he actually directs and writes. Right. And this is the first time he meets Molly Ringwald. So.
It is. And you know what I love about this? This is also, this is where he takes the character of Huang Ho from Christmas 59, and he's Long Dong. You know what I mean? This is where, like, this is what I was talking about, how he, like, some of the characters in his writing show up in his other movies.
Yeah.
And the great thing about it is one of the articles I had read regarding, let me, I'm stepping away real quick. I'm just right around the corner.
That's fine. We can still talk. I mean, we can put out another commercial. This is shoes. Shoes are awesome to wear, folks. Especially if your feet hurt and you don't want to walk on jagged ground and rocks. Shoes work. Put those shoes on and just walk over things, and your feet feel fine. We endorse shoes. Shoes are good. They come in different sizes, different shapes, and sometimes different styles. Shoes.
It's good for the soul. People are going to watch this show and be like, I get what they're saying. And then all of a sudden they go into these things and it's like, what the fuck?
That's the whole point. Heck, I'm not.
We can do it. We can do what we want. Because
it's ours. Sean Beach.
I will say this, though. Like, the funny thing about, like, a character like Long Duck Dong, okay? Back in the 80s, the Asian American, like, I'm not sure. There's an organization for, you know, Asian American actors and stuff like that. And they were having a hard time. And to this day, they still kind of do. But their issue was stereotyping characters, Asian American characters, or actors, if you will, into these stereotype characters in the movies. And a couple of movies that try to get away from that were pretty much, the only one that comes to my mind was Big Trouble in Little China. But the thing is this, the argument was, well, hey, like, you keep putting us in these roles of, like, karate and, like, kung fu masters and stuff like that. But it's like, that's what these roles are. So we're not actually disparaging you. We're stereotyping you. Like, this is your ancestry and history. And then we're trying to reinforce that with Asian American actors. It's like when they take an actual
time they're actually doing the right thing.
Right. And then that's what I couldn't understand. So I'm like, well, I'm not understanding what the issue is here. But where it kind of did go Ari was with the character of Long Duck Dong. Now, mind you, Geddy Watanabe didn't care because he was getting paid, right? He's an actor. He's like, that's my character. John Hughes and them weren't really, they were kind of oblivious to this kind of stuff at the time. And then the one guy in the article writing about it was talking about he had a friend who was like Korean or whatever he was. And he's like, did the guy care? He's like, no, he went and saw that movie like 6 times. He loved it. Like, you know, like, who really cared? You have to have these characters. These characters, it's not making, I mean, okay, making fun of some of the stereotypes, but, like, everybody has that stuff, you know? So, again, I just think it was funny that it was somewhat of an issue, but John Hughes still, it was, you know, he wrote it perfectly.
1985 is his big banner year. He did Breakfast Club, where he was producing, he directed, and he wrote the script. And he acted in the end, even though he was uncredited, as Brian's father, picking him up at the end. This is one of his bigger ones. We've already talked about Breakfast Club ad nauseum, but the next one was European Vacation. Do you remember seeing that one? Enough that... But here's the thing. they pulled something in this movie that they didn't really do or wasn't planning on doing, because Anthony Michael Hall wasn't available to reprise his role as Rusty Griswold. So what they did was they made it the big giant gag that every movie the kids would be different.
Right.
So there was a new Rusty and there was a new Audrey. But it was still Beverly D'Angelo and Chevy Chase playing Clark and Ellen.
Right.
So I don't know if that was something that that John Hughes signed off on, but it looks like whoever directed it, that was something they had to do.
Yeah, I think he thought, I'm sure that he was part of that gag. I'm sure he did sign off. I think when things were going down with Anthony Michael Hall, and I guess it was scheduling conflicts, if you will. I don't really remember at the time what he might have been doing. Mm-hmm. But all the same, I think that John Hughes saw an opportunity in that as well to say, okay, yeah, I get the gag. Let's do that. And that'll be an ongoing thing. Because it maybe been in the back of his mind that he wasn't going to have, Anthony Michael Hall forever playing, Rusty, because he was growing up too in real life.
Yeah.
So.
And then we come up to Weird Science. He didn't. He directed this one, but wasn't an actual producer. And he did do the writing for it. And this this pretty much rolls out his 1985. And you figure right now, all three of those movies, maybe with a little bit of an exception of European Vacation, but all of these movies are considered 80s cult classics. I mean, like, people go to them constantly still to this day if they want to laugh, if they want to just be enjoyed, get the memorabilia, the nostalgia out of it. A lot of these are three.
That might have been why AMH wasn't in that, because he was already committed to and working on Weird Science. Like, it's easy for John Hughes to write a screenplay because these movies aren't getting filmed, until he completes a screenplay and sells it. There's a process, For all we know, he wrote Weird Science in like 81, 82, whatever. Possibly. And so, so thematically, timeline, it could have just been like he got AMH to sign on for Weird Science, but then scheduling wise, they had to film that, European Vacation on these dates. And it was like, okay, well, he's already doing my other movie. So, and he was directing Weird Science. So he wasn't going to be like, well, let's pull him off the movie. I'm actually directing to give to this movie just because I wrote the screenplay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A lot of times there's a lot of detachment from what I understand in Hollywood, from like the screenwriter to the director and all of that once it's sold. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, unless they're like supposed to be on set with them, I don't think John Hughes even at this time was in a position where he had to be on set. Changes, they were probably made by like underwriters. And as long as the director signed off on it, that's probably what the changes were.
And you got to see that a lot of the directors had the same mindset that John Hughes did in the first place. Like Chris Columbus, he was one of those guys that sort of thought how John Hughes thought. So you knew a Chris Columbus movie, even if it was wrote by John Hughes, had that sort of same flavor, that same feel. Along with the guy that did Matty, I forgot his last name, but he did a lot of stuff for National Lampoons after Harold Ramis did the first one. But they all had the same feel. It was they didn't really divert too much from the written material, which is good in that department. So 1986, he only did about two movies this year, and Pretty in Pink, where he was acting as a producer and writer. He didn't direct this one, but he did direct Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where he acted as producer, writer, director, and he also did another uncredited acting scene where he was the guy that was running between the cabs. So.
For some reason, I vaguely remember that.
Uh-huh.
I don't. Breakfast Club's my favorite movie, and maybe it's because I've seen it a billion times.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't remember him being the dad at the end. But I vaguely remember him running through the cabs at Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yep. And Ferris especially, the whole idea of, I mean, and do you know how many right now there are like so many fan theories about Ferris Bueller's that sort of make you question what the hell did John Hughes originally think about when he was creating this? I mean, like, is Ferris even real? I mean, is he an imaginative person for Alan Ruck's character?
Right.
I mean, like, there's like a whole bunch of different things. You're like, wait a minute, is Ferris even real? And
right.
and I watch it and I'm like, you know what? Some of these theories could be pretty damn close. And if that was the case, John Hughes was brilliant about it.
Right, because here's the thing. It has a very, and this is going to sound crazy to say because, of course, this work and this movie came out way after Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but Fight Club, there's a psychosis, there's a psychology there that, you know, of course you think, well, Brad Pitt's riding along Edward Norton the whole time. And then come to find out, as we know, it's Edward Norton the whole time.
And yep.
Now,
Tyler Durden isn't even Tyler Durden.
Right. The beautiful thing is Ferris Bueller could very well be Cameron.
Yeah.
Alex's character. Because in the first scene, he's like talking and, you know, he's all like, oh, I don't feel good, this and that, right? He's faking sick, blah, blah. But Cameron was sick the whole time. Remember, he wasn't feeling good either. He didn't want to do anything. Yeah. Cameron's sick. Because I didn't read the internet stuff, but if we're going to bring it up and talk about it, just in my own theory, I can really see that. When he's like starting to go off the rails on his day off.
Yeah.
It's like basically, and what did I say in day one was Ferris Bueller was beautiful because it was like one of the first films that like broke the fourth wall between the audience and the character, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every time we see Cameron in the shot, like in the museum when he's just sitting there looking, staring at the piece, but Ferris is talking to the camera. It's like what Cameron's probably thinking.
Possibly.
And then like when he backs the car up out of the thing and all that, you know, like out of the garage.
Yeah.
So it's a shame that Hughes isn't here anymore because I bet nowadays people would say to him like, hey, what about Ferris Bueller's Day Off? Tell me about it.
Yeah.
You know, there's a documentary out there that was done in 2008 called "Don't You Forget About Me," and I believe there's an accompanying book. But it was these four filmmakers who went on a quest to find John Hughes, and they wanted to ask him all these questions regarding his writing in the movies. And I don't know if they ever got to him. They end up interviewing a lot of other people involved in the movies, actors and whatnot, but I don't know if they actually got to him. And then, of course, in 2009 he passed away. So
yeah,
I need to see that documentary.
Yeah. So 1987 comes around, and a movie I didn't know that he had a lot of influence in, but it turns out he produced and wrote it. It was called Some Kind of Wonderful. This is probably I wouldn't say my first viewing of Leah Thompson. But because that would have been Back to the Future. And then from there, Red Dawn, and then this movie. But I didn't know he had a lot of involvement with this, so that definitely becomes a different... I mean, it's still in the same vein as most of the other John Hughes movies, but there's a huge difference between this and, say, Breakfast Club.
Right.
It's I don't know if it's made to cater to a more of a older teenager or a younger adult. But yeah, I mean, I always thought this was a really interesting movie for that. And then my personal favorite was Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Right.
He served as the director, producer, and writer for that, and he also wrote the song at the end. Called I Can Take Anything, because I've been with Del Griffith. I can take anything. So apparently he came up with all the stuff at the end for that. And I tell you, the best Apparently, the fire alarm's going on at the house. My wife must be cooking. But yeah, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. This one has a little bit more of a personal connection with me, my sister, my father. This was one of the movies we went to a lot when we were feeling down. A lot of shit happened with my family back in the day. But my father, this was one of his biggest, his favorites, and he loved John Candy to death. But the idea of actually having a Thanksgiving movie is a lot. It's definitely not common anymore. And the sad thing is, it should be, because especially the trek to get home before Thanksgiving, and then having all this shit happen to you. It's a comedy, it's a tragedy, it's a comma tragedy, it's all that put together. Especially when you start to get into the deep background of Del Griffith, which was John Candy's character, and you find out that he's homeless and all that stuff, and it's a really good movie. This has always been sort of one of my favorite John Hughes movie, like 1A and 1B with Breakfast Club. And then I found out that he was attached to a bunch of other different stuff and didn't know about it. So that has to change. But yeah, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is like, if you haven't seen this movie, if you're one of our listening audience and haven't seen it, do it, because it is a great movie.
I think it's good for people who, this kind of sounds like I'm teaching a life lesson thing here, but it's a good movie if like you have issues with people, and you are annoyed by people, and you go sit down and watch this movie, and it's an eye opener, because it makes you realize, like, wow, you think you know somebody, or you think you know enough about somebody to make judgment, and then you find out things, and it totally changes your perspective. That's kind of like the moral of the story was. We know Steve Martin's character didn't, of course at first he's like, yeah, whatever, you can chill with me for a minute, whatever, and it turns into this thing like, when is this guy getting away from me? I got to get away from this guy. And in the end, of course, it's like, again, it's like he ends up being extremely rude to Del Griffith, and then the truth comes out, and he's like, oh man, I feel like a jerk. Well, of course you do. How many times have we not experienced that with people in our lives, or people experience that with us? I mean, so if you're feeling like you're having a problem with somebody, I would say, man, sit down and watch Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, because it'll change your perspective. At least you might walk in and that person might still annoy you, but you'll be like, maybe he's going through something. Maybe instead of being a jerk to him, I should find out what's going on and see how I can be of service to him. And not enough people.
You might act as a person's blessing, and not even know it. So, and
that's part of the movies. That's relatability, because it's not like these fantasy worlds he's creating outside of like weird science, maybe, and Home Alone. These things would probably really happen. Okay, like this can happen. Like skip school and then but
you're breaking up, dude.
Of course, trouble ensues because they're doing shit they shouldn't be in the first place.
Mm-hmm. So, that runs out his 1987. Usually, considering the fact that his 1985 he had probably the most stuff that he'd put out. So 1987 he only had two things, but 88. Did you know he did She's Having a Baby?
Did not know it until I was doing our research. Familiar with the movie. I know Kevin Bacon and was it Elizabeth McGovern?
Mm-hmm.
Were the characters or the actors and actresses in it, but I've seen it. I've seen it, but I didn't know. Didn't attach myself to it. Didn't know that it was John Hughes.
Yeah, I didn't know it was John Hughes either. And
but see, we're kind of getting into this time frame too, where I think he's starting to realize his teenager audience is growing up.
Yeah,
he's growing up. the actors that are playing his characters are growing up. So I think he's starting to try to stretch the realm of like, okay, let's get more into like adult settings.
Yeah.
I don't really have much to say about She's Having a Baby, though.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not saying it's not a bad movie, but again, I just didn't find any relatable quality to it at any point. Maybe if I go back now because I have kids, it'll be a different story.
Yeah, we might be able to now. Now that we finally, we've taken that extra step. But then one of my favorites he did, The Great Outdoors, which teamed up John Candy, his main man, with original not ready for primetime player, the living legend Dan Aykroyd. And I love this movie on so many levels, especially the scene with the guy that gets struck by lightning 66 times in the head. I mean, like he came up with some really interesting things.
I wonder how this movie is, and I have to watch it, and it's been a while, but I remember it being one of his. It wasn't as popular. Funny movie, but it wasn't as popular to like John Hughes fans.
No, it wasn't.
But I also
he didn't actually direct it.
Well, that, and I was going to say, how much input do you think John Candy and Aykroyd had on the writing?
They had a lot.
Rights. You know what I mean? Like once you're in there filming the movie and you got actors of those caliber and that experience and that have time put in, like how much they were probably like, John, this will be funnier,
Yeah. Hold on 1 second, okay?
Sure.
Yeah. I'm filming. I'm going to turn this off one moment. I will be back. Here's another commercial. Sorry about that, folks. I had to help put out a fire. And finish dinner. My wife is a Girl Scout leader, and she does, certain things. And she couldn't finish because someone needed her for something else. And that's why I was conscripted to do this. Yeah, again. So we were talking.
Show.
Yes, we're back to the Oh Yeah Dig It podcast show. I'm going to tell you right now, this is the last. This is going to be our last segment. But yeah, we were talking about Great Outdoors, and you were mentioning about how this necessarily wasn't one of his more popular movies.
I don't know for sure. I wasn't. What's the word I'm looking for? When was that? 88.
Yeah.
So
88. Yeah.
I was 8. I'm not saying back in the time, but like reading reviews on the interwebs, they were saying that it wasn't necessarily like his best work, obviously, but I think too it was kind of a departure from his normal stuff because his normal stuff was like teenager related, situational stuff.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I love the movie, especially the bald-headed killer bear from Clare County. I mean, that was a big one. And then the bear's bald on both ends because he shot the bear, and the bear's got a bald ass, and he's running through the darkness. I mean, it was a great movie, especially ending on the dance, Man of a Thousand Dances. That was a good old time song. It was really cool. This goes into 89. 1989, Uncle Buck. One of my other favorites, enough so to the point where this was my introduction to Macaulay Culkin, and I didn't realize at the time, but he was our age going into this movie. They made him look like he was much younger, but he was 8 or 9 years old, the same as us.
Well, he was also he was one of those kids that was a really small kid, even though he was older than what he looked anyway. But definitely this is my number 2 John Hughes for me. My number 2 John Hughes movie, next to Breakfast Club.
Yep.
The reason being because one, it's John Candy, and it just to me personified what I felt like an uncle or somebody like not as close to your parents' relative would be like with you.
Yeah.
You know, you came into town. And funny enough, my uncle Steve, he was, you know, nothing like Uncle Buck. But here's the thing. When Uncle Buck came out in 89, I had just moved to like Maryland, somewhat time earlier that year or whatever. And my aunt and mom had gone out or whatever they were doing. And my Uncle Steve like took me out with him. And it just so happened it was like this holiday party or whatever. And it was just funny because I remember Uncle Buck, and it seemed like we were like cruising the streets in his old like, you know, Chevy Astro van, like whatever, but it was like crappy. And he had all this like medical equipment in the back because he sold medical equipment, and you know, and he was deaf, so like, you know, he so even though he wasn't boisterous like John Candy, it was kind of like comedy of like, what do you like? I never understood what he was saying anyway, you know. I just kind of like went with it, you know? Like kind of like Macaulay Culkin, you know what I mean? I was just like, okay, you know, whatever, yeah, okay, you're cool, you know.
Yeah, I loved every bit of that movie. I actually had a crush on the daughter. Who played and she was amazing. And especially the dynamic between her and Candy.
Oh, I mean, let me just tell you the first thing I wrote when we did our research, because I was watching Uncle Buck. Like the night we decided to do John Hughes, and in the very first like scene when, you know, Miles is like running away from the bullies and he's like just hiding behind the house, and Maisie comes in, and then, you know, of course Tia appears, and she's just like, you knew right away, like Ice Queen, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're going back and forth, and then Maisie and Miles get into it, and Maisie says to Tia, you know, like, why do we even need boys? And dude, Tia drops this line, and it like, listen, we're married men, okay? We're married men. I'll be damned if we don't feel like this sometimes. She says, we need boys so they can grow up, get married, and become shadows.
Damn.
And that line hit me in the feels, like right off the top, because I love my wife and family very much, but there are times where as men, we're just like, what are we here for? Like, or we feel so inferior. And that was the line that put it into perspective for me. It's like that line you haven't heard in a long time, but you know there's something out there to express what you're feeling like. That was it.
Yeah, man.
And that was John Hughes. That's John Hughes, like his genius.
He made people think about life, and I don't think very many directors nowadays make people think about life anymore. What are you doing? Hello.
But
all right, now you're back. Yeah, now you're back.
It was getting a little fuzzy there. I was just like not even talking just to give it enough time to kind of maybe catch up.
Yeah, because like something happened in between here, but that's all right. The next movie, and this was a classic. This is my number 2 to Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, which is Christmas Vacation. I love this movie to no end. He served as a producer and writer for it. He didn't direct it, but you know, you could tell that this was one of those zany John Hughes testimonials, so to speak, on the American family, especially around Christmas. And half the stuff that he went through and did on Christmas Vacation, it's classic. I mean, enough so that every year they put it on a loop on TBS to watch. Well, but no, I don't know if it was TBS or TNT, but they put it on a loop basically to watch throughout Christmas Eve, Christmas Day.
Right.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I love that movie to no end. Especially the scenes with them trying to get the Christmas tree fixed. And
Dude, can you hear me, dude?
You're Optimus priming out, bro.
Dude,
It's like I can hear you a little bit. There you go.
Dude. Damn.
Yeah, dude.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Dude, you're sounding like a damn sleeping spell.
Really? You mean like one of those things where you pull the thing and like the cow says?
It's the thing where you like would type in letters and it would like A, B, A, D. You sounded like.
So we had a little bit of technical problems there. We're back, though. Looks like everything's been set up smoothly. We were originally discussing Home Alone, which we would say is probably like the last of like the classic John Hughes movies. But you were originally talking about something in regards to Home Alone, so I'll just let you finish what you were saying.
I think I was just talking about the fact that, like, in one sense, Home Alone was a departure from the teen, and the everyman kind of work that we saw with like John Candy's characters in John Hughes films, Chevy Chase's character Clark Griswold in the Vacation movies, and then, like we said, the teen angle that he really perfected. Home Alone was more of a camaraderie between like the wonderment and curiosity that a stranded little boy gets into, especially in the face of danger with the wet bandits.
Wet bandits.
The bad guys.
Yep.
But the reason why it was a departure, but it was also kind of a new beginning, was because, funny enough, Hughes it's like he put out this perfect piece, and it was his new magic. But unfortunately, it seems like he kept trying to go with that, like kind of in the kid realm, and it just didn't work very well in his later work, like Baby's Day Out.
Yeah.
Crap. Again, Beethoven, the first one, probably is a great movie because of the nostalgia factor now. And back then, it was, the first one, it had Charles Grodin, who was a great actor. Some other actors, I'm sure.
Well, dang, the lights all went out on me. I got all spooky. I know.
But it's important to just kind of, if anyone's gonna go back and say, John Hughes, he really seems to have been talked about a lot back in the day. Danny's pushing out the scary vibes, guys. Pushing the scary.
Apparently.
But the thing is, John Hughes was this guy right here.
Why not, man?
Did the power just go out?
No. If the power honestly went out, I wouldn't have TV. I think it's just this light here has a timer, and it goes out at 10 o'clock, and it just burned everything out. But that's all right. I mean, I can finish this last bit looking like some floating phantasm from a Class 5 full rooming vapor.
All good. Just to end what I was saying on that, while the departure from the teen series kind of, for me, started with Home Alone. Home Alone 2 was a continuation of that. They were great. And I don't know what it was. Maybe it was just the fact that, well, hey, we can still relate to that as young teens because we were kids just not long ago. And it's kind of always been at least little boy's dream, like to be like that adventuresome little kid who like isn't afraid of any kind of opposition or danger. And, watching, we're like, that's what I would have done. That's what I would have done. And you almost leave the movie hoping that something like that happens. So you can go and throw paint cans and tacks and all kinds of stuff on somebody.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, from there, it just kind of started going downhill. And that's not to say that his work's not great. I mean, like he did, people don't realize this, and I feel like John Hughes kind of knew, like, just kind of going downhill because a lot of his later work he wrote as Edward Dantes. So while you might see like written by, it says Edward Dantes. That's John Hughes.
Which is
Made
funny
in
because
Manhattan.
Edmond Dantes is the dang,
You're
it's
thinking of. I know who you're thinking of from Monte Cristo.
the Count of Monte Cristo is Edmond Dantes, and he's
It's
I don't know if it's an allusion to that, but that's sort of the thing that I got from that. All right, so the 5 movies that if you haven't checked out, especially in regards to John Hughes, top 5 movies that you absolutely have to see. What were
first and foremost, Breakfast Club.
That's number 1.
Breakfast Club's number 1. Number 2. I'm just gonna go with, for me, Vacation.
Yep, that's a good one too.
Number 3. What do you put on number 3?
I would say number 3 would be Weird Science, because
Weird
that
Science.
gives you a little different setting in regards to maybe the more fantastical stuff that John's doing outside of like the normal like life stuff.
The beautiful thing about Weird Science was it was literally exactly how it was when you spent the night at your best friend's house. Like you thought of weird random shit. You tried to do weird random shit together.
Yeah.
And you talked about random shit. And behind all of that, there was sexual frustration or sexual desires or like the dream, because you talk about your dream girls and you did all these things.
Yeah.
And it was so
and why
it's a good buddy.
And why you thought you loved them and everything. Like, oh man, this girl's boobs were amazing. This is great. Nah, her hair is everything. I'm like, yeah, it's true. It's one of the big things that they do is pulling from real life that information, doing all that stuff, but adding that fantastical metaphor attached to it that Lisa actually becomes like this sort of neo genie. Yeah. All right, so number 4. I would say our number 4, if you haven't seen it, do it, would probably be Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Yes. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. It's a good holiday movie.
Mm-hmm, very much so.
Especially Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. And like we were speaking earlier, that's a good movie to like just take yourself away from your BS and understand that like you're not the only person in the world kind of
exactly.
Always felt like that was the message of the movie, you know, like so yeah, that's number 4. And then number 5, I think we did this before we started. We talked about this, but I got to get Uncle Buck in there because
I have to agree with you too. Even though I'm partial to Home Alone in that spot, Uncle Buck is Uncle Buck is one of those movies where everybody's got a crazy family member that does outrageous shit, and Uncle Buck is perfect for that.
The close runner-ups would be Home Alone, and then most likely I would say,
if you are a huge fan of Jennifer Connelly, like myself, Career Opportunities is a good one too. But that's sort of neither here nor there.
But you know what? The thing about that, here's the thing I liked about that movie. Looking back at it, and just real quickly, because we didn't really touch upon it, but we should. It had Frank Wiley in it, who was a big actor back in the day. He just didn't get like a lot of starring roles. No. Jennifer Connelly, of course. But the thing is, it was a perfect 90s movie. Like it was present time when he wrote it, when the movie took place, and it fit into like the realm of what was going on in the 90s anyway. Mm-hmm. You know? And so these movies, for the most part, have a nostalgia factor. So the kids who go in today to watch these movies, they won't get that because they don't know that they didn't see them before like we did. Mm-hmm. But the one thing they're going to take away from every single one of John Hughes' movies is that Danny the Dude Atwell disappears in the dark. No, it's that
even in
this
the
is some
Hollywood
weird shit, dude.
right, like even in the Hollywood light, though, your little Midwestern or East Coast little like bumfuck town, there's people that were just like you and going through the things that you like. Because I feel like too today, like kids today, they want to be so special, and they feel like
But they're
that
not
what
special at all.
well, they're what they're going through like hasn't been. We haven't done that. We haven't gone through it ourselves, or like just other people don't know how to go through that, or haven't gone through that. Like it's not true. I mean, look, this is perfect. I mean, Breakfast Club, man. I'm telling you, for any kid in high school, going to high school,
perfect.
You're gonna watch that movie and be like, I'm one of these people. It was like the five, like the major food groups. It was like he represented the five like top sects groups in the high school environment.
Yeah,
and that's never changed.
Yeah, it hasn't changed.
So
at the end of this video, we're going to do a nice little tribute to John Hughes. But for next episode, what did we want to discuss? Because you and I sort of bounced some stuff around, and
yeah,
I think maybe, since we sort of was a little tame with this one, maybe we should let it rip with the next.
We will let it. In fact, we're going to let it shred. And I just want to preface this with, we went to a singular topic again because Danny used big words in the question before, and I had no idea what he was talking about. So as soon as he said singular, I knew that meant by itself. So I said, that's what we're going to do, something by itself.
We're going to do something by itself.
Right, because I got to go refer to my Webster's dictionary now. We're going to be talking about the top 10 metal bands of the 80s. So we're going to be shredding in the topic. We're going to be like, wah, 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 wah. Some of those might have some of your glam rock hair metal bands because despite the popularity, despite what, the hardcore 80s metal fans may say, we have to kind of go with popular as well. Pop culture is part of our thing. And
right there, like
Def Leppard, Metallica,
Iron Maiden, Motorhead. I mean, we're going to go through Motley Crue. We're going to go through a couple of different ones, and we'll discuss not only their impact in the 80s in general, but their impact on pop culture going forward, even to now. So all I got to say is it's going to be one hell of an episode.
It's going to be a good one, folks. So make sure you tune into our YouTube channel because we're going to be dropping major licks on the 80s metal bands. On the next.
Oh yeah. Dig It podcast. Woo. I get chills. Oh, wait. Hold on. Bye.
See ya.